evening. Welcome to my Death Note Revisited review. That wasn't actually me playing. I can't play shit. Anyway, where do we begin? No, seriously, where the fuck do I begin? Well, it's 2020 and the world's ending. Might as well rewatch the show about the notebook that kills people. Revisiting Death Note 13 years later opened my eyes to things I missed when I was younger. The show does a lot of stuff better than I remember, and a lot of stuff worse. Way worse. The biggest surprise for me was how tolerable the last third of the show is, since I remember it being an unwatchable 0 out of 10. I was 20 when the show came out, in like 07 when it finished and we all watched it for the first time. I don't think I understood why they went the way that they did, because, you know, after, there's spoilers in this all the way, but after L died, like, it was a 0 out of 10 for me at the time, and unwatchable. I would have said it's one of the worst endings to any show, like, the quality went from here to here, but now I kind of understand why it went that way. I'm older, I see the reasoning behind it. It's not as bad as I remember. It is still bad. That's for sure. The last 12 ups are still bad. It was bad before that too, but it's not nearly as awful and unwatchable as I remembered. And while I was prepared for that noticeable decline in quality, what also shocked me was how the show started sucking long before the death of L. The first step blew my mind with how well it held up. Like, seriously, how much information is conveyed, the opening with Ryuk and the comparison to Light and the way they're introduced. It was all fascinating, and I was like in there again. I'm like, holy shit, the visuals are great, music's great, this is awesome. I was excited to binge the whole thing again. Was excited. And even after those first half dozen eps with, like, new rules, like the deal for the Shinigami eyes, none of this felt stupid. Like, it was all world building. I thought it was really cool, and I really liked the way that, you know, you see the rules and the pauses between the episode, like, breaks, like, halfway through the episode, it shows you, like, 2 new rules or 2 old rules. Okay, so this is important because the first third of the series is where all this worked. But shortly after that, it just gets dumber the longer it goes on. It always did seem like the story was one thread away from collapsing upon itself. With every new twist and turn, it was so close to ruining its own lore before coming in to save itself from itself. L's deductions were entertaining and provoking, but several times he knows things only because the story calls for him to. Light, too, has that divine intellect that allows him to suspect what everyone around him is thinking before they even do. That basic dichotomy of Light and L was always the show's staple, and what made it so fun to watch in the first place. And seeing it now that I'm much older allowed me to see how much of L's ego got into the way of his thinking. Very early on, he points out how both he and Kira are childish and don't like to lose. But now I was able to see it in all his actions. L lost because it wasn't about justice for him, but merely the chase of catching Kira. The show initially seems to point him out as the good guy, especially with that abstract blue lighting, contrasting Light's bright reds. But a great thing the show does is show you that's not always the case. For L, the ends justify the means, just like Light. That's why he lets so many people, both police and civilians, die, for him to get closer to Kira, and why he has no qualms capturing and torturing Misa. In fact, it's like he gets off to it. You can very clearly see he enjoys doing it, so he's not disturbed by the fact that, you know, the ends are even justifying the means in this case. Like, he wants to do these things. And so the line of justice is heavily blurred. That's the best thing about Death Note. It raises a lot of moral questions and philosophies, and has the brilliance not to answer them. It sort of leaves it up to us, which is why we're still talking about the show, which is why many people can watch it. They can hate Light from the beginning, they can agree with him, they can start to hate him, understand why he's doing what he's doing, understand L, understand why he's doing what he's doing. We could all agree and disagree, and there's like this nice, almost objective viewpoint of it where the show doesn't really take sides at some point. Initially, you think it does with L versus Kira, and you're like, okay, it wants L to win, but then very slowly but surely you're seeing that L is kind of like Light and Kira, and you're not even sure anymore who the good guy is, and that's really good storytelling. That's great writing. That's ambiguous. That's, you know, getting you to think about the death penalty and all these, what makes a person evil? Are we inherently good? Are we inherently bad? The role of memories, I'll get into that later. These are all wonderful topics that are brought up. Unfortunately, they're not all delved into as they should be. This is where the show's problem is. Like, it sometimes grazes things. But if anything, it becomes more confused and repetitive in its portrayal of them. Which is why eventually the show becomes a fucking chore to watch. It's around the time Light forfeits ownership of the Death Note, along with all his memories. And here is where the contrivances and stupidity of plot build. And you have to say goodbye to any realistic sense of approach you had with problem solving these twists. I know, realistic approach in a show with death gods and, you know, the Shinigamis and magical notebooks and shit like that, but it made sense in the world that they built at the beginning anyway. And the more it goes on, the less it makes sense, even in its own world. And even when it makes sense, it is the stupidest fucking shit. Finally, the entrance of the Yatsuba Corporation and every single thing involving them is where I groaned and begged for the show to end, as I zoned out for its parts. It's just so fucking dumb, and it's pointless to meander the story to things it has already explored. Yes, we know humans are easily corrupted. We didn't need a new Kira to illustrate that, so along with Light's willing confinement, these make the bad parts of the first 25 eps. They lead to phony twists you can see a mile away, like Light's dad pretending to threaten a double homicide on him and Misa, and silencing the conversation between Light's dad and L to make it seem more important than it is just really lame. What else was stupid? Or Matsuda faking his own death, like, it's not that compelling.
Guess what? It's not that compelling.
You put the cold brew in the cup, it becomes the cup. But what I like about the show is how our own thoughts and ideals are challenged throughout. At the beginning, I think most, if not all of us, could agree on creating a world that is free of criminals. Light begins killing those only guilty of awful immoral actions. But sure enough, his moral compass begins to sway. And before you know it, he's writing down people's names that stand in his way, innocent or not. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. His ego also gets in the way. That's why L's fake appearance works. And we understand why Light would not hesitate to kill him, even if we wouldn't agree with him. To the show's credit, Light's descent into maddening evil is never forced or contrived in itself. It is completely understood, even by viewers who hate him from the beginning, because of all that happens. It's very natural. It was a great progression, or regression, I should say. A super smart model kid given the powers of a god would destroy the morals of even the best intentioned. And so we see it, and we believe it. You know, it just gets all of us thinking, what would we do? What would I do if I had a note that I could just kill anybody whose name and face I know? And if you think about it, it's so fucked up. That kind of power just sounds so easy. Oh yeah, I just start killing the worst people alive or barely use it, but then very slowly, over time, you would realize that kind of power is with you, and having that option is very terrifying. And then again, if you started like killing a lot of people, it would point to, somehow they'd trace it to you. Believe me, like whoever's doing it, they'd figure out, oh, there's a connection. There's one person who knows all these people, and then all of a sudden the target would be on you, and you'd have to turn the light and start, you know, figuring out these ways to avoid police detection at the same time while continuing the killings. And that's what's really fascinating about the show. It kind of expedites that process because of L, you know, and figuring out that there is a Kira. There is one guy doing this, but somebody would figure it out if you did it. If it happened in our world, it would happen. Believe me, there's always someone smarter than you. That's another lesson of the show. It's fucking amazing. Like, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could fucking do it. I loved L when I was 20. At the time, I considered him a perfect character and always rooted for him. Now that I'm almost 33, I see the flaw in his nature and how he was more selfish than altruistic. He wanted to win, not for objective justice to prevail. That was a hard realization for me. The guy going against the new evil of the world was himself a little bit evil. The few pure of heart in the show start with Light's dad, and the innocent Matsuda, who wants to believe the best in people. And it's him who first points out that Kira's methods seem to be working, since the crime rate all over the world has decreased drastically. Maybe the ends can justify the means. That's why it has to be him to shoot Light in the end. There are many great moments in Death Note. The first appearance of L, his reveal to Light in the classroom, Light's revival of his memories. Holy shit, what a scene! One of the best scenes I have ever seen. Rem, the female Shinigami's entire involvement. And even in the weak last third, you still get a couple great moments, like when Nier first introduces himself to Light over the phone, and Light's like, what is this feeling? And you see the chained and shackled L behind him. L is looming. He's never left. Like, even in death, he's gonna win. And he can't escape him, and he's just like, Nier, is this a joke? And he never defeated L completely. All these things are what stick with us, even if they are shrouded in devolving lunacy of writing. For instance, the show's derailment of its own great premise to silly anime tropes, like L even ending up in a classroom with Light to begin with, or them being handcuffed together for so long. Some stupid stupid-ass shit. And also Misa's character mattering less and less, and the whole subservient, obedient, I'll do whatever you say thing. That's too anime for me, but kind of get away with it because she loves Kira and is a servant to him. So they barely got away with that one. Barely. Still weird. Actually, Misa's entrance as the second Kira may mark the exact moment when the characters start knowing things they shouldn't. But Rem comes in, and everything about her is great. Her reveal on how to kill a Shinigami, her love and protection of the dumb Misa, her deterrent to Light's plan. If I notice Misa's lifespan is shortened, I will write your name in my death note and kill you. I treasure creative shit like this. But it all falls prey to the repetitive pattern of the show, which goes something like, new plot reveal, Light plans something, L immediately deduces. It gets less fun the more you see it. However, I really gotta remark on that great idea of memories. How when Light forfeits them, he becomes good again. And even when pressed by L, he refuses to use and manipulate Misa for their cause. It's against my code to manipulate a woman. Which is a hilarious and ironically tragic line because we've already seen what he's done to Ray Pember's wife, Naomi. What a fucked up scene that was. Is he still guilty of his crimes as Kira now that he doesn't remember being Kira? Can you punish a man for doing immoral things now that he doesn't remember doing them? This was the whole premise of the amazing film Dark City, which carries out these implications much better and gives the ultimate message. You went looking in the wrong place.
You wanted to know what it was about us that made us human. Well, you're not gonna find it in here. You went looking in the wrong place.
Unfortunately, in Death Note, the role of memories and the nature of good and evil is only brought up and not really played with enough. That was a big loss of potential, but oh well. Go watch Dark City and get an idea of where they should have taken it. But I also think it's neat that L and Light become friends once his memory has been erased. That was something I wanted to see more of. Like how L tells him, "You're my first friend." Who knows if he's telling the truth or not? Whether or not he's had any friends or whether he generally considers Light to be a friend. Because deep down he knows he's Kira, so he wouldn't consider him a friend, would he? Or maybe he does because, again, L is a little bit evil in his methods, and it's all about the chase of catching Kira. And so maybe his enemy is his friend, so maybe in saying you're my first friend, he knows Kira. He's saying it to Kira. Kira's my first friend. And the excitement of catching you is what makes me live, like the will to live there. I don't know. Kira and L are enemies, but Light and Ryuzaki are friends. It's a great duality about our hidden personalities. Like how early on Light talks about how people condemn Kira out in the open, but online they praise him. But as I said before, the show constantly saves itself from itself. Because always when it's about to get stupid, there are some epic reveals that jump in at the last second. You get the kind of interactions like when L tells Light on the bench that if he dies, he has told everyone to suspect him of being Kira. And just the way it's lit, you know, just the lighting through the trees, it's like this Kurosawa nature-like lighting. I thought that was very eerily and awesomely done. What an amazing deterrent! These kinds of things rescue its decline, if only briefly. Because at some point, it stops saving itself. It does give up on its great cat-and-mouse detective formula and becomes something else entirely. Something dumb. Some great themes are brought up but sidestepped to focus on weak sensationalist plot turns, which pale in comparison to what it once was. The animation also notably changes, and not for the better. The show looked great when it started. Its visuals and colors and all the music rocked. But then you can tell later on that a lot of the eps are rushed. The characters are drawn in funny and thin ways, and don't look like their old selves. It returns to looking great for the last episode, though, and for that I am grateful. But I suppose the problems it has are what all shows like this succumb to. It's that the elements that were once surprising now become brushed aside and common knowledge like they don't matter anymore. Just take a look at how Light's dad easily makes the deal for the Shinigami eyes. May as well blast on loudspeaker that he's about to die. And even then we don't care. His passing in the hospital was among the phoniest moments in the series. Like, I could not possibly have given less of a shit, and Light just is like, write down Mello's name in the notebook, and it's just so fucking phony, and, you know, he closes his eyes and then they turn red. It's just so stupid. That's some stupid shit, man. But the end. The last 12 eps, which I dreaded watching, I now must admit I was wrong about. Oh sure, they're still not good, but I can at least say I see why they went that way, and why a lot of people like it because they wanted to see Light finally lose in a pitiful manner. He got way too cocky and made careless decisions. It was never about a watered-down L in Nier and Mello, merely that even in death, L won. Because I think in L's final episode he knows for certain Light is Kira, and he knows for certain he is about to die, but he just can't stop himself. The infamous foot washing scene, which I've read is only in the anime and not in the manga, can be interpreted as L being Jesus and Light being Judas about to betray him. Makes sense to me. I think the whole episode feels rushed, with Rem having to figure out that Light wants her to kill L, and L pushing so hard to have the 13-day rule of the notebook tested. And yes, it may be the show's best twist, but I can't help but feel it was sped up. I don't know how to make this review interesting. It's so fucking boring, I'm losing my mind. Going crazy. Anxiety rises and depression to meet it. L's passing in Light's arms is left ambiguous as to whether he can see in his eyes his delight at his death. The view for us is clear. Light's crimson gaze smiling maniacally over a passing and calm L's fading blue ones. Wide-eyed staring back, yet there is no clear reveal that L can see that Light is Kira. It's only obvious to us. So I'm not sure if in his final moments he saw that, but I know in that entire ep it was made clear, at least to me, that he was going to be killed by Kira. So I think it's kind of neat that they didn't, definitely show that Light was like, oh, it's you. Which you get that normally, that it would be solidified as an objective viewpoint for the audience that L knew that he was murdered by Light, which is Kira in that moment, but they left it very, very ambiguous the way it's shot. You can kind of guess that he knows, but there's no like silly line where it's like, it was you, or anything like that. It's just staring back and forth. I won't talk so much about Nier and Mello because I don't think they're as important. Nier shares the autistic characteristics of L with none of the ego. He's cold and calculating and emotionless, like a robot. That's why he's the one who can finish the case. And Light's arrogance as a new age god led him to pass off Nier as a lesser L. And now that I'm older, I like the idea that everyday people affected by Kira become his obedient followers, like both Misa and Mikami. When I was younger a long time ago, I had written Mikami off, but now I can see how a justice-obsessed person would eagerly become the servant of Kira. It's still bad writing that Nier looks at the TV and figures out he's the third Kira, though. I didn't hate that as much this time around because I knew it was coming. But when I was younger, I wanted to take an axe to the TV. Because it's impossible! It's impossible! How did he know he was the third Kira? But overall, the last 12 eps have too many coincidences that line up with the characters' thoughts. Too much hinges on all of them coming to the same conclusion without speaking to each other. And even though Nier's musical theme is cool, all the fun has been sucked out of the story. It just keeps getting worse. The show is obsessed with its former epicness and just keeps repeating the same dumb shit over and over and over again. It has failed to come up with new creative juices. Another Shinigami visits the human realm for no real reason than comedy and to let them know there are fake rules written on the Death Note. But I must say how incredible the voice acting of Light is. I'm talking about the sub, guys. How never for one single second I heard a voice actor. That dude was Light and Kira. I think that's a huge reason why this show was such the monumental hit that it was. Like, that guy was incredible. For him to be the protagonist, they had to get the right guy. At the beginning, you know he thinks the world is rotten and you believe everything he's saying and it's real. The guy who voiced L was really good as well, but a few times I noticed myself escaping the world and noticing a voice actor act. Not so good. Guy voiced Light, Mamoru Miyano. Okay, that guy, incredible, perfect. They found the right guy, absolutely amazing, mind-blowing, 10 out of 10 job. And the guy who voiced L, Kappei Yamaguchi. Yeah, mostly a really good job, but again, at times, I could tell there was a voice actor. He kind of lost me a little bit. Overall, really good. He's also Usopp in One Piece? What the fuck? I think a lot of the show can and will hold up for these times. Its premise is a commentary on the slippery slope of the death penalty, the nature of inherent good and evil, and how there's always someone smarter than you. It tackles so many philosophies like Nietzsche's will to power, and his whole wariness about becoming a monster when you're battling monsters. A major musical theme is named Low of Solipsism, but I'm not so sure how to relate that. Since isn't that the belief that only the self exists? Death Note more so looks at only the self being relevant, not so much that you're the only mind to exist. Someone much smarter than me is going to have to explain that. Is that the point of solipsism? I've never understood that word and that philosophy. I mean, how to apply it in writing and speaking and in shows and shit, because if you're the only mind to exist and everybody might be a figment of your imagination, I feel like there's no point in that philosophy except for that saying that it exists, that that's a possibility, because you'll never know for certain that if you're the only mind or if everybody else has their own individual mind, and that's fine. But Death Note isn't saying that. It's saying that I'm right, you know, it's saying that my ideology is the correct one, not necessarily that I'm the only thing to exist, but is that part of solipsism? I don't know, maybe it's not such a great job of explaining it, but Light and L have differing views of justice. I am justice, they keep saying, you know? My way's the right way, despite these awful things I'm doing to get the right thing, and what their mind is right. And then Nier comes along and he just stops him. He's less of having his philosophies and more of just stopping a killer, you know? And again, the show never really answers what justice is. It just sort of brings up these questions, which is really cool. But at the same time, why Low of Solipsism? Why is the theme called that? You know, that piano theme? Oh, whatever the fuck, however it goes, I'll play it in a second. Roll 'em, Charlie! Yeah, I guess I'm just an idiot, but yeah, what the fuck's solipsism? It's not a selfish ideology, though, is it? It's more of a depressing, lonely one. Whereas Light and L are more of the selfish self, you know? What the fuck am I talking about? Also, I really like the final setting of the yellow box. That warehouse where all is resolved. Dumb as those twists may be, I could admire that it's a great spot to end something. A great little setting and location. I did not appreciate that when I was younger. That's another thing about getting older. You start to appreciate other things more, you know, backgrounds, settings, art direction, where things happen and why they happen. There's stuff you kind of think about when you're younger, but as you're older, you really appreciate because you understand how long it takes people to make films and to animate stuff, and you're like, oh, that's where they chose. It's different than everything else. Again, as stupid as all that shit is, I think it's really cool that Mikami is, you know, staring through the door, and that Nier knows that, and then, again, all contrived bullshit, but the animation is right and on point and great, and the music is still really good, and the location is wonderful. So I could appreciate that location was really, really awesome, if only the writing hadn't declined at that point. But as far as a final place to end stuff, it was an interesting, innovative, creative thing. That was one of the creative things they left. The yellow box, you know? Yellow box. Like Yellow King? Like that play that drove everyone insane that read it. Like the Notebook that brought terror to all who touched it. Did you notice how they lost their motivation for a lot of stuff, too? I appreciate that when Mikami came, though, he was like, delete, and the way his, like, purple lighting and slashing, that was a little bit returned to form. Not quite enough, but I thought it was okay. F-26, the second half, Ryuk. So I can't expect anything interesting to happen? No, you can't, Ryuk. No, you can't. But I don't care about Nier and Mello nearly as much, and Light's dad getting the Shinigami eyes, that was really just, holy shit, was that bad. And Mello surviving that explosion. I mean, the dad kind of survived it too until the hospital, so he could get that phony moment with Light. Mikami kills himself. That shit made me laugh. His self-masochistic final act to let Light escape. That was a little cool, meaningful thing. I thought that was nice. I did appreciate Light's downfall, as dumb and contrived as it was. I guess he had to lose, unfortunately. That wasn't one of the show's strengths, because, you know, with the ambiguous nature of justice and all that, I thought they would be smart enough to leave that ending where Light won and, you know, L lost. But I guess they couldn't do that. I guess people wanted more, and they wanted good to triumph, or maybe not necessarily good to triumph, but for evil not to win. And seeing Light pathetically lose was interesting too. His laugh was insanely maniacal. All that was really well done. Again, none of that is bad. It's just the nature of the story and the writing, the script beforehand. All the visual elements really worked in the ending, and that's why a lot of people didn't hate it as much. It's because the show still looked great in those last couple episodes, and Light's voice actor, again, incredible job. They're all doing the best with what they have, and his just way to try to weasel his way out when Nier finally catches him. It's just dumb with the whole Death Note. No, oh, so we switched this, but we knew you switched that, and I knew you were tracking me and Mikami, and I knew you knew we had a Death Note, and so we switched it. But then, oh, Mikami wrote at the suicide of Taki, whatever her name is, at the same time that Light did, so they switched it again. I can't even keep up with that. Terrible ending. But I switched the Death Note. Oh, no, I switched it back, and then, you see, I knew you were watching me, and so I switched it again. So I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew that I had the real Death Note. Terrible ending. Zara. How do I make this review better, Zara? How? What do you, Zara? Oh, right! Light's revival of his memories. I gotta talk more about that scene. And the epic 2001 reference, you know, how the camera goes like this, was the same when Hal's about to kill that astronaut in 2001. The way they did it, and then he screams, oh, a perfect scene, absolutely mind-blowing when the show was so stupid with the Atsuba Corporation, but I like that Elle and Light were buddy copping it up, and you hear the plane in the background, right when Elle looks at Light, and just in time to see him, you know, just perfect execution. That was a total out-of-body experience. Amazing. Maybe one of the best moments I have ever seen in anything, just the way it was done. And the music is just perfectly subtle, and the certain memories he sees flash just for those few seconds, and watashi wa eldest, you know, in his scream. Alright, Light's a Pisces. They show his birthday kind of briefly. Yeah, he's a Pisces, so I guess that kind of makes sense because they're oblivious to how their decisions affect other people. So him, you know, killing everyone, killing who he deems unnecessary for existence. And also Pisces are kind of close with their family, so I guess that would explain, you know, he likes his dad. I mean, less so later on in the show, but they're fucking weirdos, so he's a weirdo. And then I had to look this up for L because I don't think his birthday is shown in the show, but he's a Scorpio and also like 6 years older than Light. And then I wonder if the 6 years had passed, because remember the show starts in 07 or 06 and ends in 2013. So I think Light is the same age as L when L died, when he was 24, 25, I think, or close to it. Were they trying to say something? When I first watched the show when I was young, I thought they were the exact same age, but if I'm looking this up correctly, L is older than Light by a significant margin, 6 years, you know, and I thought it was just two kids chasing each other, but it's like one little bit older kid chasing a high schooler. College kid. And L being a Scorpio makes sense, you know, narcissistic personality, mysterious past. He really is selfish and he only cares about his own perspective and winning the case and the chase of catching Kira. I forgot how funny that Demagawa, a news reporter guy, was, well, the head of the TV station, always wanting to get the story and ratings using Kira. That was an interesting way to play it. Definitely would be people like that in real life. He's like, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But the whole Takada, Misa love triangle thing, well, I guess where Light's playing both of them, that is just so silly. Writing notes to each other, oh, can you make it any more obvious, you're Kira? Ryuk, I wonder what'll happen after L dies. Me too. Oh, that's another interesting thing. L clearly has a lot based in Batman, because, you know, he's the world's greatest detective. He has an old butler, Watery, you know, who's based on Alfred, and a Bat Cave, you know, the building he has set up with all that money he somehow has. Der Wills are mocked.